Good morning, and welcome to the first two sessions of the workshop series, Tap into the Data Person in You. This workshop series is sponsored by the Office of Institutional Research and Analysis, also known as OIRA. And it is a part of OIRA's efforts to build a data-informed decision culture through the use of analytics, reporting tools, and new technologies to impact student success and to advance data literacy for campus stakeholders and constituents. You might be thinking, what is data literacy? Data literacy is the ability to read, work with, analyze, and argue with data. We believe that improving data literacy hones your decision-making ability. So today is about empowering you to use and analyze data. You will have the opportunity to participate in two sessions. The session titled Mastering Excel Pivot Tables, How to Crunch Numbers Like an Expert, is being presented by Dr. Sarah Kerrigan, Associate Provost for Institutional Research and Analysis and Chief Data Officer. The session titled Utilize Grades Data Dashboard will be presented by Dex Prather, Business Intelligence and Data Analyst. Each session will be offered twice, so you will have the opportunity to attend both workshops. While you are in the session, we encourage you to use the Raise Your Hand tool to ask questions or place your comments or questions in the chat box. So let's get ready to go into the breakout room. Please look at the bottom of your screen and you should see breakout rooms. Please click the breakout room icon and select the session you want to attend first. Thank you and enjoy your session.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Looks like right now, I guess, James, it's just you and I right now. Oh, there we go. Now we have Sandra and a few others are joining.
There are 18, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, 15 unsigned participants, 14.
Want to get my timer going here. So good morning, everyone, as you join. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started because there may be quite a few questions towards the end. So the session is about 45 minutes, and I'm going to spend about the first half just going over a few different things. At any time, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Either through the chat or through raising your hand, or even if you just want to go ahead and turn yourself off mute. So looks like just about everybody is here now. So I just want to go over a few things. So the information that we're going to talk about is going to use the grades data as an example, but all of the methods here can be applied to just about any data that you have. So although we're going to be using grades, this is not specifically about grades. So I just wanted to let you know that. And the data that you see, please don't use that data because it's not real data. So the names and things that you might see are not real. So those are all made up and just thrown together. So I just wanted to let you all know that. Okay. So first thing I just want to go over also is just a couple of definitions. So institutional data. So what is institutional data? So institutional data is defined as all the data that's collected or generated by the institution. So what might that be? So that might be student data, faculty data, the list of faculty, the list of staff. It might be a database or a list of all of the buildings and rooms on campus. So it's basically information about the institution. Most people think of institutional data as things like demographics, like race, gender, age, and that is also, but just want to let you know that it's a lot more broad, or a lot broader than just that. So types of institutional data that we have here on campus, again, I mentioned students, faculty, staff, but one of the things that I wanted to make clear about the data that we have here on campus is there's real-time data. So when a student gets added into the system, there's a lot of things that are available immediately. But then there's also historical data or archive data. So there's data back, quite a few years. So if we wanted to go back and get data in 2015 or 2016, we have that data. We also have historical data at different points in time throughout a term. So for example, there's beginning of term data, there's census data, there's end of term data, and there's post grades data. So depending on when you actually look at that snapshot of data, you may or may not see what you're looking for. So for example, there won't be grades in census data because the grades haven't been created yet. All of that data is also generated at different times in the term. So if you're looking for post grades, you tend to think, well, at the end of the term, post grades or grades data is available. There's a lag following when that data is actually available. So the post grades data, for example, won't be available at graduation. It would actually be available a few weeks or so after graduation. A lot of that data is sent to the system office, and with some of our dashboards, that's the data that we actually access, is the data at the system office. Anybody have any questions so far about the types of data that I'm mentioning here? So I just wanted to bring that to your attention so that when you request data, that you understand that there are different snapshots of that data. And if you happen to know when you'd like that data, that would be helpful, but also that there is a delay in when you think data might be available. So just wanted to let you know that. The other part of the data that we have here is that we have the data that is publicly available, and then there's more sensitive data. So data that's publicly available are things like the enrollment, things like lots of broad numbers or summarized numbers tend to be things that are publicly available. Just about anything you see on US News and World Reports about different campuses comes from our office, and that's data that's generated from the institutional data here on campus. Things that are a lot more sensitive would be things like a student's grades. So that data may or may not be available to you depending on your role and your level of access to that data, but that data is not publicly available. So moving on, any questions about that? So when you ask for data, part of whether or not you're going to be able to gain access to that data is based on your current role. So one of the first places to look for data is on our website for institutional data. So I am going to share my screen here. Screen share. Okay, and then the first thing I'm going to do is going to go to the OIRA site. So nccu.edu/OIRA, scroll down. And if you've been to any of our past demonstrations, this will be familiar to you. Dashboards. We've added some new options, how to use dashboards. There's a video here, so if you have any questions about that, you can go there. So I'm going to go down to grades, since I said I was going to use grades as an example. And you'll see how basic this is. So this is what's publicly available. And you can see that basically there's not a whole lot of detail here. So if you were looking for more detail, I mean, it's by college, I can filter here by course level or by term, take out some terms if I want to. So I can do some of the filtering here. And we ask that if you have any initial data questions, that you see if that information is available here. And again, it doesn't have to be grades. It could be any of these others. So there's the grades, obviously, but then there's credit hours, enrollment, admissions, and so on and so forth. So if you are unable to find what you're looking for there, then we do ask that you contact our office, and we will see what we can do to help you gain access to that data. Okay. So now that you've actually seen some of the data here, one of the questions might be, all right, well, I see this data. I can go ahead and I can go and look at it. So how would I get a copy of it? So if you scroll down to the bottom here, there's this little download button here, which will allow you to download the data that you see on the screen. As you can see here, there are a few that are grayed out. That is in part because this is public data. If you have access to the more sensitive data on Insight, then these options would be available to you. So I'm going to go and just show you what you might see here. So if I go ahead and say, all right, I just want to get an image of what's there. That image is just a basic PNG formatted image. I'm going to open it here. And you can see this is just an image. So you can copy and paste that into a PowerPoint or whatever you want to do with that information. And again, here, if you would have to filter that data before, I'm going to click apply here, so it'll get rid of 2018. So you'd have to filter that data before you actually produce that image in order to see what you'd want to see there. Okay, so go into one of the other options again, scrolling down to the bottom. And I'm just going to show you these options really quickly. PDF, again, this is just a basic image format. So .pdf, maybe if you needed to attach it to a document or something like that. So you can see that there. And then I'm going to go to this very last one, PowerPoint. I haven't found much of a use for the PowerPoint version of these downloads. Again, they are very basic. And so you can see here's the actual data. So that's basically what's available to the general public for these dashboards. So what we're going to do here is we're going to spend a little more time on some of the more detailed data. So I'm going to close this. And I'm going to go back to dashboards. And I'm going to go to grades detailed. So you can see there's a little lock here. Any of the detailed information that we give you access to or that you have access to that's available on Insight requires that you have an Insight account. And it also requires that you're connected to the campus VPN or that you're here on campus. Otherwise, you won't be able to access that data. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. And again, I'm not going to show this information. I'm going to go over, but just want to see that you could get there. Now I'm going to just switch over to the demo data. So what we would normally give you is a link directly to the dashboard. So this is not something that you would have to do, although you would be able to do this if you had an account. So if you had logged into your account and you go to Explore, you scroll down to NC Central University, this uses your campus credentials to log in. So I'm just going to go to my folder here and then go over to my grades demo. Okay, so if you had access to this information, you would more than likely be given this link here at the top or be sent directly to this page. And then you can see here that on this dashboard, there's lots of other information here. And you can also see that this is a lot more detailed than what's available to the public on that public grades dashboard. This information, like I mentioned, is sensitive.
Hey,
Yes.
yeah, I was listening to it. It's only like 40 minutes long.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go
I can
over.
go at any time.
I think Ms. Miles, I believe you're. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to go over to this this new page that we've generated, and again, not everyone has access to this. Again, these are all fake. None of this is real, but I wanted to show you what is available here. So here, instructors, the courses, and the rates of each of the grades for each of those courses. So that's the kind of detailed information that's available if you have access to it. For all of the examples that I'm going to use this pass rate. So again, any questions so far? So I showed you the ability to download that data from the public page in that image format, the PDF format, and the PowerPoint format. Now I'm going to show you, if you're here connected to this pass rate page and you want to download that data, instead of going down to the bottom of the page the way you did on the public page, up here, if you have access, there will be a download link here. And now you can see that all of the different options are available. So before it was just image, PDF, and PowerPoint. Now there's data, crosstab, and this Tableau workbook. The one that you would most likely be using is data or possibly crosstab, but I'm going to show you what each of those looks like with the same pass rate data. So first I'm going to click data. All right, so the data that you see here is basically that summary data that you saw on the page up here. So here you see the DFWI status and the terms. So you see DFWI or pass, and then the terms, and then the courses, and then the rates. Here in the data, courses, the names, the status, terms, the total number of students in that course, the rates of this status, and then the number of students who obtained that status. So if you took this 9, 40 divided by 43, you'd get the same number over here. So this is just the summary data that you saw here. There's additional data that's available in addition to this summary data. I'm going to go over here to full data. And now you can see that they're actually letter grades here. And it makes sense that you'd need letter grades in order to generate the different rates. But if you were just printing the summary information, you wouldn't see that. So these are some of the features or abilities that you'd have to view that more detailed data. So again, any questions so far? And again, if I'm going too fast, please let me know. So I'm going to show you what this data looks like. So here's the summary data, and we saw that, but let's say we actually want to do something with it. So I'm going to download, click that download all rows, and you can see over here in the lower left-hand corner, there's this pass rate data.csv. I'm going to show that in the folder first. And you can see that there's a little Excel icon here. That's because any .csv file on this computer has been identified as an Excel file. So if I just double click this CSV file, it's going to open it in Excel. So I'm going to do that, show you what it looks like. So here we have that same summary data. I'm just going to do some minor reformatting here. All right, so there we go. So again, this was just that summary data that we saw on that other page. What I want to let you understand here, though, is that this is a CSV file, not an Excel file. So I'm going to minimize this, go back to this file, and I'm going to open it with Notepad. So those of you that are familiar with CSV or comma separated variable files, you can see here are the labels, and then a comma, and then the next label, and then a comma. And then here down below, you see the data, and then a comma, data, and a comma. So this is really what the data looks like. Excel is just formatted in such a way to make it look a little different. Once you bring it into Excel, you would need to save it as an Excel file if you want to keep things like the column types, if it's a number versus text. If you want to save any of that information, you need to save it as Excel and not as a CSV. So again, just wanted to let you know that when you download that data, that's one of the things that you need to keep an eye open for. Any questions on that?
Yeah, one question.
Yes.
Yes, sir. You showed us the details of this data, but I think for the School of Business, we would like a link to this particular data, if we can have access to the link, really, because we need to do some things. We usually do our own assessment and we use your dashboard to do that. But what you have shown us so far seems to be the in-depth, a critical analysis of your data. But I don't think we have a link to this, the access to this in-depth data. So how do we get access to this data?
Yes. So send a request, and yes, again, depending on your role, you would have access to this data. So if you could send a request, we can go ahead and make sure that you have access to it.
Thank you.
Actually, I can go ahead and put you down here as having requested that.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Currently, all the deans and chairs do have access to this Insight dashboard.
Yes, so if you have any questions, again, or if there's an issue accessing this data, please let me know, and I can always get back to you and we can walk through it just to make sure that you have access. So any other questions on accessing data? And again, all we've done so far is just we've gone over downloading the data that you see in just a basic data format. And again, download data. And that was the summary data that we looked at. I'm going to go over to full data and just want you to see the difference here. And I'm going to go to show all columns and then download rows as a text file. Because I really want to give you an idea of the amount of data that's available out there. All right, well, while that's going, I've actually downloaded that data. So let me go over to one of my downloads, Grades Demo. Full data, all columns. So I'm just going to open it from here. And it's taking a bit of time here because if you look at these file sizes, let me just go back here. If you look at these file sizes, this summary data was only 277 kilobytes, whereas that full data was 93 megabytes. So you can see there's quite a bit of difference there in the file sizes that are generated. All right, so here we are with that full data. And you may or may not have a reason that or a need for that full data. I just want to let you know that it is here. So again, I'm gonna do some minor formatting here. There are literally hundreds of fields here. So I'm gonna just scroll across just a little bit But you can see, I mean, there's, tons and tons of information here. So for most people, the summary data would be sufficient. But if you did need more than that, that data is available. Okay. So don't save. Any questions about that? Okay, now I'm going to go to another one of the download options that you actually might end up using a little more often than some of the others, such as moving some screens and things around here. Okay, so again, this same demo page, going back to download, this crosstab option gives you the ability to download an Excel or CSV. I would recommend just keeping it here at Excel and then download. Okay, here it is, showing folder. So now this is a true Excel file. So if you look over here under the type Microsoft Excel worksheet, as opposed to this comma separated value. So I'm going to open that. Okay, I'm going to enable editing here. Do some reformatting. And you can see that this actually looks a lot nicer, I think, for that grades data. And this would be the same again for just about any data that you decide to look at. We did not have any filters on that data. And again, this is not real data, but you can see I can scroll all the way down here and I have information on just about every course that's available in that demo database. So this formatting here looks a lot nicer. Now you probably would need to change some terms here, like the number of records is really the number of students before this would be usable. So one of the things that we were talking about here is using institutional data. So one of the things that you might want to look at, or you might want to do, is look at trends and generate some sort of report for some of this data. Now understand that this is really just one academic year here, so you really can't or won't be able to identify any kind of real trend here. Going from fall to fall to fall would probably make more sense here. But just for demonstration purposes, if we were looking at this DFWI rate here, anybody see any kind of trends on any of this? I mean, again, this is not real data, but here you can see that this DFWI rate seems to be dropping, right? So let's go ahead and do just sort of a quick report here. So I'm just going to highlight that area that I want to generate the report for. So once I highlight it, I'm going to go to Insert, Recommended Charts, and here it comes up with a couple of charts that I could use. I could also change that, to a line chart. And again, this is more of an Excel. Well, this is Excel, so you need to know Excel and how to generate reports using Excel here. So here, just a quick and dirty way to generate a quick report that I could then copy and paste into PowerPoint or into something else if I wanted to. So any questions about this? Again, I could highlight more. I'm just going to go ahead and again, just do another quick insert, recommend charts. This one doesn't make quite as much sense because it's showing percentages, and obviously those percentages are really low. So again, you'd have to go over to something, and again, it's more Excel or knowing Excel in order to do what you want to do here. So now I've generated a quick report, throw in some labels. And so that gives you just that basic report. So any questions on how you might generate reports from some of the data that you have access to? And again, I know I'm going kind of quickly on this because there's quite a bit that you can do with some of this. Sorry, I'm just going to log into some of my other notes over here. So for all of this data, I've been using Excel as the tool to manipulate that data or to generate reports from that data. Now, there are tons of tools out there that you could use. So Excel is just one of those tools. If you are familiar with R or RStudio or Python, those are some other tools that you can use. Those tools are free. You could also use tools like SAS, SPSS to manipulate that data. And depending on your role, those tools can also be free. I believe here on campus, faculty and staff and students have access to both SAS and SPSS, although students may have access to student versions of those software packages. So we're not going to go through, again, those tools here because of the limited time. And Excel seems to be one of the tools that people use most often. So again, any questions about how we got to that data, what we did with the data? All of the data that we showed there was, we generated the report using that accounting data. But you saw that in that actual data file was data from everything because I didn't have any filters specified. So if I go over to the right-hand side over here, if I just wanted to limit that data to accounting 2400, click apply. So now I just have access. So now I just have that data displayed here. And now if you go through all of the downloads and so on, we just have accounting 2400. So if you need to limit the amount of data that's pulled down, that's one good way to do that. And also, again, depending on your role, you may not have access to that full set of data. This is a demo, so this has access to, or it has data that's generated for all of the colleges, all of the courses, but that may not be the case for your area. So again, any questions on what we've shown so far? All right, so I'm going to go back to this chart. So I'm just going to look at this chart. And actually, this chart might not necessarily be a good one to use here because I was going to show some trends and things like that. Although I might be able to do it with this one. All right, so here I'm just going to go ahead and just change this chart type. Chart type to a line, and I'm going to edit it. Okay, series 2, remove. Okay, so I just limited this chart to just the rates here. And what you can do with some of this data is project where this information might be in the future. And again, this is more data analysis, and tools like RStudio might help you get to where you want, or it might give you more flexibility in modifying that data. So here, now that I've displayed that data, if I click on any one of these points, right click, I'm sorry, let me just do that again. All right, so I'm clicking on one of the actual data points, not this label. If I click on this label, I don't see what I need to see. But I click on a data point here, right click, and you see this add trend line. So I'm going to add a trend line here. And by default, Excel is going to pick a trend line option that it thinks represents the data that you have here. So in this case, it looks like it's linear, so it's going to pick this linear option. I'm going to say forecast just a couple of periods. I'm going to put 2 here. Display the R squared value. And you can see, and again, this example is probably not the best example because it trends towards 0. And actually that would be a good thing, but going negative doesn't make sense. But again, you can see the trends here. So here is the 1997, and then of course you can go on a couple additional terms here. So this would be 2 additional terms. One thing that we could do, I'm going to go back and get a set of data here. Okay. So we have right here, fall 2017, fall 2021. And I'm going to pick these 2 courses, Accounting 2400 and this health course. So I'm going to download that data into that crosstab format. Any questions? We're about 30 minutes into the session. So we have about another 10 minutes or so. And this one is taking just a little bit longer. Okay. Oops. There we go. All right, show in folder. Let me make sure, because this does not necessarily look like the data that I'm looking for. So if you have access to Insight, the Insight is maintained by the system office. So any issues with Insight, you can always contact our office, but we would end up getting in touch with the system office to go over any potential issues. We just got a notice from Sylvia that there's only 5 minutes remaining in the session. So I'm going to close this one down. Again, to just give you time for any questions. So anybody have any questions on anything we've gone over so far? So again, what I've been showing here is grades, but the information that is available is much broader than just grades. So again, I'm just going to go back here. We may get cut off at any time. So again, if you have any questions, here's enrollment.
Dax, I have a question. Do those different dashboards speak with each other? Like, does enrollment speak to I just saw another one.
Right. No, not in this case, because on these pages, we're looking at publicly available information. So it's one-time data, basically.
So, but in the deeper system, the insight system, they do speak to each other?
So no, they don't, because Insight has archived data. So Insight has data that we send to them. It's not real time. Here on campus, some of the real time data may be linked. So making a change in one area might be reflected in that, but not with any of the dashboards.
So
the
that
other
would
piece
be
of that,
that would be if we wanted that data combined, that would be a request to you.
yes, and when you say talk to each other, some of the data is linked. So, for example, you might have instructor information from an instructor table, course information from a course table, and have those two linked so that you can see, additional details for the course for that instructor. Does that kind of answer your question?
Right, and I wanted to point out with the people that are online that you can build dashboards for like a specific purpose. Like I know that you've built one for criminal justice.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yes, if you don't see what you're looking for out there, again, please contact our office with your request, and we will do what we can to generate either a dashboard or get that data to you some other way.
Dax
All
is
right.
the best. He is the best.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes.
Retention. How do you get the retention rates for your department?
So retention should be out here. Let's see. Let me scroll down. Retention, graduation. So this is the publicly available information. And if what you're looking for is more detailed, contact our office. But here are the basic retention rates. Is this the kind of information you're looking for?
Yeah, but I was trying to get the actual retention like from year to year. Did we?
Oh, as opposed to the percentages?
Yes.
So down here on the bottom, so there are some actual totals here on the bottom. And again, if you don't see what you're looking for, contact our office. It could be that we can make some minor modifications to make it clearer.
So could you show me, like for math and physics, could you show me the retention rates
Let me,
for this past year, from one year to the next year?
Let's see. Okay, so it looks like on this page, it's not, let's see. Retention rates, it looks like it's not filtered by course here. And that's essentially what you would be looking for, right?
Yeah, I'm looking for like for department, like for mathematics, how many did you retain? Or physics, how many did you retain from year to year?
Got it. So it looks like that would be something that we could fairly easily do here. Again, just adding a filter to filter that data by course. And again,
So Dax, go back to the second tab
okay.
and pull down the program.
And you said math, right? Which program would it be?
Mathematics.
Sandra, I don't see mathematics.
What about physics? I see physics, but I don't see math. Open the physics and let me see, but I don't see mathematics is not listed.
Last entry, oh, this is entry program retained. So that's the students here. Last program retained.
So that only go back to 2019.
So because the retention is based on multiple years. So it goes back to 2013 here. But you don't have 6 years worth. So it's based on the fact that there's 6 years here. So you can only, so Sandra, I know there's a reason why there's not, the 2020 here.
2020, that looks like hasn't been updated. 2020 would be the farthest we could take it out. So it looks like 2020 hasn't been updated yet, because 2021, you couldn't calculate until fall of 2022.
So is this based on cohorts or actual number of students we have in the department?
It's based on the first time, full-time students that enrolled in your program, either at entry or if they were retained in that program. So that's why at the top, you see the last program retained, because a student may enter with one major and then change before they graduate. So that one is based on last program retained. The bottom one is based on entry. Now, even though they may enter in your program, they still may not graduate in your program. So
Right.
that's why we do it two ways.
And Dax, is this real-time data or is this still the fake data that you're working with?
This is not real-time data.
Right, exactly.
Anything you get from the OIR is going to be based on census, historical archive data.
Right. So just as I mentioned before, actually most of our programs or most of our dashboards are based on census data. And then some are based on like post grades, but no real-time data here. So we only have a few more seconds before I believe they're going to kick us out. But you're welcome to attend this session again, or this will be saved. This recording will be saved.
Hello. This pivot table tutorial is based on a recent workshop that we offered. We are re-recording it for clarity and continuity. What is a pivot table in Microsoft Excel? A pivot table is a summary of your data. It is packaged in a chart that lets you report and explore summary trends. Pivot tables are particularly useful if you have large data sets that you need to track and compare. They let you group your data in different ways so that you can readily draw conclusions about the information. What is required to create a pivot table in Excel? The data is on an Excel sheet in rows and columns. The top row has a title or header that represents the data in each column. There are no empty columns or empty rows in the data set that you want to analyze. Each row is a distinct set of information that describes the items in the table. For example, your table may be students who are registered in courses with the grade that they earned in the course. It may also include information about the course, the term, the department, the college, and the college in separate columns. Okay, let's take a look. We are on the tab Sample Grades. Here you can see in the top row, the header row has the name of the data in each column. It's good practice to review the data so that you know how many rows and columns you have and what type of information it contains, and look for any missing rows and columns. Here it appears that we have data in columns A through J, our last column J. The data represent course enrollments and grades earned. This data has been anonymized, meaning that the student ID has been replaced by the number 1 in the student column. When I scroll across the columns, I see that column D is actually empty. When I scroll down, I see that the very last row is row 13,058. You don't want any empty rows or columns, but before I clean this data, let me show you why you shouldn't have empty rows and columns. To start a pivot table, put your cursor in the top left cell of your data. In this case, it is cell A1. Go to the Insert menu at the top of the window. You see Pivot Table is the first option in the ribbon. Select it. The Pivot Table wizard opens up and shows you the data range that it has found. Cell A1 through C4799. We know from our review, this should include all the way out to column J and go down to row 13,058. You can see a broken line outlining the data. The pivot table goes out to the first empty column, in this case D, and the first empty row, 4899, and assumes that this is what you want to analyze. But that's not everything in our data set. Cancel this operation. I'm going to scroll down to row 4800, which was our last major row with data in it. Right-click the row and delete it. Now I'm going to scroll back up to the top of our data set, find our empty column D, again right-click, highlight, and delete that column. Now, go back to the beginning, cell A1, insert a pivot table, and continue. You can see that the full data set is now included in the table range, A1 through I1357. This is a little different because we've eliminated the one empty row and one empty column, reducing our range by one column and one row each. Choose where you want to put the pivot table. I usually leave this as a new worksheet. Hit OK. Notice at the bottom of the window that we are now on a new tab called Sheet 1. Right next to it is the Sample Grades tab that has our data. On the left side of this screen, see this table outline. It has the name Pivot Table 1. On the right side of the screen, you can see a gray box. It lists the pivot table fields, and it has several windows at the bottom. The pivot table fields are the names of the column headers that we were just looking at. You may need to scroll to see all of the headers. Next, you see four smaller white windows: filters, columns, rows, and values. This is how you will organize what data the pivot table will show. You do that by dragging and dropping the fields to these boxes. I'm going to drag Course College to the rows. Look at the pivot table on the left. We now have two rows for each of the colleges that are actually included in the data set. Next, I will drag term to the columns. Look again at the pivot table. There are 3 semesters in this data. There's also a grand total in the last row and the last column. There's no data yet. Now I want to select my values. I will drag student to the values window. Again, drag and drop. Now look back at the pivot table. It has data. These are the numbers of students in the courses in these 2 colleges in each of these 3 fall semesters. I want to reformat this data. Go back to the values window. You can see that student is now called sum of student, and it has a down arrow to select options. Open that down arrow and select value field settings. This new wizard shows you how the field is getting summarized. It defaults to summing the values, but you can change it to count or average or max or min and several other statistical options just by scrolling down to select the one that you want. In this case, I'm going to change this to count. This grand total doesn't make any sense. 160,054 count or sum. It looks like some of the anonymized students may be greater than 1. This looks better. I want to make another change to how the data are displayed. The totals are in the thousands, but there isn't a thousand separator. Go back to the field settings for the values. Open up the window again. Now go to the number format. This is an option in the bottom left corner of the value field settings. This opens a new window that lets you select the category for the number. Then you can set the number of decimal places and include a 1000 separator. If you have negative numbers, you can select the style. Hit OK. Hit OK again. And now you see the pivot table has the 1000 separator. You can add more information to the pivot table by dragging other fields into the summary windows. For example, drag course department to the rows, drop it under course college. You can see the change it made to the pivot table. The rows are nested to show the parent college and the departments that are within each college. In this brief tutorial, you have learned the essentials for creating a pivot table in Microsoft Excel, including some basic data cleansing in your source data. I hope this helps you get started on the data analysis that you can do with pivot tables. Good luck.